All right. So I'm gonna skip over the basic stuff since you already know me pretty well. Um, with this workshop, I'm primarily focusing on kind of the high level in terms of understanding the flow of the customer's journey. You probably have gone through some programs where they talk a bit about the buyer's journey, user experience, that kind of stuff. But this will be slightly different. It's more about understanding what they are looking for in terms of resources. We'll talk a bit about target customer as well. I won't go into building customer personas, but I'll just allude more to understanding that different strategies or different maps will have to be adjusted depending on who your target customers are. So if you have a situation where you have multiple potential target customers, like let's say, one would be a large nonprofit, another could be like a Fortune 500 company. The kind of strategy that you build for each target customer should be different because in theory, they would all look for different resources as well. And then we'll talk about channels and tools. We'll talk about qualifying behavior, and then we'll go into what are lead magnets, what kind of call to actions you can use as well. So I guess when it comes to thinking about a go-to-market plan or launching something or any kind of sales or marketing strategy, one fallacy that I commonly see with a lot of companies is that they see it as kind of this one-off monumental thing that they do one time and done. I actually discourage thinking of it that way. Number one, because when you think of it that way, it becomes a bit daunting to get started because you feel like you have to do everything perfect in order to put your baby out in the market. Instead, I think it's more helpful to think of it as a series of iterations that you go through. The best example here is Apple. Every new product that you have is a new launch. And launch is very important because not only for you, but also in the market, every time you launch a new program, and new is subjective. So what I mean by being subjective here is, you could change pricing and tada, it's new. You could add a new component to the program and tada, it's new. I mean, to you, it may not seem like a significant change or improvement, but if it is big for your customer, then that in theory could be new, right? So if you look at the iPhones and their iterations, the main basic components are still the same. It's a phone, it makes calls, there's a camera on it, you can watch movies, you can play music. But every iteration, they're making some small improvement. And to them, they define it as big improvements because they know that your customers want these improvements in terms of camera improvements, in terms of storage space, better screen resolution, that kind of stuff. But the idea is when you have multiple launches over time, it helps you build momentum in the marketplace as well because people see that you're doing something over and over again. They don't just see like Mario is doing one program and he's doing that same program over and over again. So each cohort that in theory could be a launch as well. So once you start to shifting your mindset as like, hey, it's different iterations of whatever you're putting out there, then it becomes a bit more helpful. You can start to think about how you can build that momentum around that. Hey, John. Sorry, I've already started, but I can quickly sum it up. And I'm also recording the session as well. So the main thing I was talking about is don't think of launch as one big, a single monumental thing that you're doing with your business. Try to think of it as a way that you are building momentum, both yourself, but also in the marketplace amongst your customers as well. That way it's a bit less daunting. You don't have to get everything perfect, but also every small thing helps you get the word out there again so that people can see that you're doing something, and it helps kind of drum up that hype, right? So of course, there is usually the first go-to-market. That might be slightly different, but I guess in both your cases, John and with Mario, you both have already launched, so I can kind of skim over some of these things. But generally, in the early phases, like some of the basic things like name, branding, logos, initial offering, target customer channels, those are things that you will have to figure out in your first launch. If you have already launched your business, you might revisit these if you're going after, you're rebranding your company, or if you think you might go after a new target market, you might expand to a new region. You want to test going after a different type of customer, like you want to go after nonprofits instead of for-profits, then you might want to revisit some of these as well, because you might say, hey, maybe different customers require different channels, or I might have to structure my revenue differently. Maybe I'm going to price in a different model, right? at any point in time, when you're thinking about going to market, when you're thinking about sales, when you're thinking of marketing, whatever efforts you put into all of it, just ensure that you're actually being mindful of what efforts will actually give you results versus efforts that you think are important but don't generally do it. And the 80-20 rule, if you haven't heard of it, is basically there are some things where you spend a lot of time on. They take up 80% of your time and effort, but they only give you a small amount of results. On the other hand, you have the 20 rule where sometimes you spend a little bit of time and those things will give you a lot bigger results as well. And the example here is usually a lot of people tend to grind their gears around the logo, the company name, website design. They try to get the landing pages perfect. They try to get the copy perfect before they launch their campaign. Really, those things they help, but you shouldn't spend too much time on it. You should instead focus more on acquiring customers, getting feedback, and focusing on your product or service. If you focus on your customer, you will never go wrong, right? As long as you're prioritizing understanding your customer, you should put yourself in a good place to understand where to go next. And just remember, like, perfect is the enemy of done. So just make sure you get stuff out there. So when you are thinking of your go-to-market in any situation, whether it's a new version of a product, whether it's launching to a new region, it's always about the customer. You're always trying to understand, am I going after the right target customer? What's the easiest early adopter to target? What do they see value in? And when I say what do they see value in, you want to understand what language do they use to describe their problem? What language do they describe how they want to benefit from it? As long as you do that, everything else will follow. So as long as you understand how you put your customer first and you prioritize understanding them, everything else, even if you don't get it right on the first try, you should be able to adjust your plan to accommodate and better fit the customer. So now that we understand that launch or go-to-market is not just a one-off thing, so it makes sense then that we should have a plan that is reusable, something that we can use for multiple launches. So every time you make a new change, you can go back to this simple plan and you just tweak a few small things and put it out there. So the challenge I find with most traditional sales and marketing plans is they tend to be very, very basic. And when I say basic, they tend to focus on the funnel too much. So you've probably heard or seen a sales and marketing funnel. For example, you have a landing page. From the landing page, it converts to a sales meeting or call. And then from there, you try to give them a proposal and then you convert them. Or on the other hand, maybe it's an email. Maybe it's the number of emails that are open, a number of emails that click through, number of people who jump on a call with you, whatever it is. It could be retail, number of people walking through your store, number of people who stop and touch a product, number of people who speak to a sales rep. The challenge with linear sales funnels is that they will work, but only if you already know what works for your customer, for your solution. So for example, if you're a realtor or if you're a mortgage agent, like if you're in an industry where you're selling the same product and you're selling to the same customer and you know that this specific process works effectively, then sure, you can use this kind of funnels. The challenge in most situations is that usually you are selling a unique product to a unique target customer. Ideally, you don't want to over-innovate and you don't want to try to invent everything and always go after something new. You might already have a new solution, so you don't necessarily have to go after new customers, but maybe your customers are not familiar with this type of solution that you have. So in that case, then the kind of straight path to converting a customer doesn't always work. When does a funnel come in and when is it appropriate for you to look at a funnel? Is once you have gotten to a point where you clearly identify the steps that your customers take to convert, a funnel is useful for you to look at drop-off points. So if you're noticing that, let's say, number of emails sent to number of emails read, there's a huge drop-off in terms of conversion, then there might be something wrong there. Maybe you're using the wrong language, the wrong copy, or maybe you're sending it with let's say a email client and a lot of your emails are ending up in the spam folder. So you can start to figure out what might be going wrong in terms of converting them. You can also look at a funnel to start to think about how to reduce what we call funnel leak. So funnel leak, for example, is, Mario, in your case, you're talking about how a lot of people respond to your emails, but then from there, they not a lot of them will actually jump on the demo call, or was it from the demo call, not a lot of them will actually convert and close. So the people who you already have contact with, how can you put them back into the funnel again and get them to go through the conversion process again? So the easiest example of retargeting is, for example, if you notice with some companies, if you visit their website, you might start noticing that your ads start to follow you around, right? Or if you added something to your shopping cart and you didn't actually check out, then they will actually come back to you and say, hey, they'll send you an email. We noticed that you left an item in your cart. So that's what we call retargeting, to reduce that funnel leak. So you can come back in many different ways. Maybe you might say to someone, hey, you know what, we had a demo call. I have an upcoming workshop. Why don't you join my workshop? Like that is retargeting as well in a sense. So if that flow doesn't really work that well, a better way of thinking of how customers convert is generally most customers go through this process called gradualization when they convert. Gradualization, in short, it's basically a series of realizations that a customer has to go through in order to believe that they want and need your solution right now. So for example, they might start with, they need to believe that what they're doing right now isn't working. Then they need to believe that there might be a better way of, let's say, getting leads or making sales. If you're doing some sort of marketing or sales type of solution, they need to believe that they can make 6 or 7 figures a year without prospecting, and how they do it is through a brand. They need to believe that social media is the best option. They need to believe that this social media product is the one that will give them results faster and easier than any other solution. And then they need to believe that they need the product now. Not every process follows a similar flow. This will be unique to your solution and to your customer. But what you want to do as an exercise is, after this workshop, just start to think about and reflect on what is that series of realizations that my customer has to go through. Because what you will find is that every prospect coming to you, they might not always come to you having need to go through this entire series. Some of them already realize, let's say, A, B, and C. And now they just need to look at, what's the best solution. And if that's the case, then you shouldn't put them through a funnel where you try to get them to understand the basics, because they already understand the basics. You can start to move them further along, and you can start to immediately give them information that's more relevant to them. Make sense? If you haven't already seen this, this is the buyer's journey. It comes from HubSpot. The theory that they have is basically the main buckets in terms of this kind of gradualization framework is that generally that's the awareness stage. Awareness here is kind of the top here, where people are starting to realize that they have a problem. So awareness is not awareness of your solution, but it's more about awareness of their own problem. And then consideration is them starting to look for solutions. Again, not even necessarily looking for you yet, but it's more about considering what are my options. Do I treat, let's say, my plant fungal pesticides? Do I treat it with natural remedies? Do I buy a insecticide? Do I try to water my plant less or keep it in a more dry environment? That kind of stuff. So they're starting to think about what are the solutions to my problem, and then you only come into the picture in the decision stage. So that's when they're starting to evaluate what is the best option out there. Do I go with this vendor? Do I go with that vendor? Are there certain benefits with this? Is it cheaper, price, that kind of stuff. So that's generally the flow. So first off, just as a quick reminder, like when you go away, do this as your own exercise. Start to think about what is that series of realizations my customers go through. And then from there, you can start to bucket them into this. So I'm actually going to show you a quick plan, and I'm just going to orient you around the plan so you understand how to use it. But the main things is when you look at this plan, there will be dates in there that you can start to put down so you understand when certain things need to get done. There's certain areas of focus so you don't drop any balls. You can start to set goals and milestones for it. And then there's specific initiatives or tasks that can go with each of them. And then same with resource and capital as well. So for example, you might realize, oh, I need to, let's say, build 50 landing pages and write some articles. Maybe I need to hire a ghostwriter, right? And then accountability as well. So who on your team is going to be responsible for it? And what are you learning from the process of launching? Because you might launch, put it out there and realize that things will change over time. Maybe customers respond better to this kind of messaging versus that messaging. So this is the template. And I can share this with all of you as well. Let me just quickly put it in the chat. So you will have view only view. If you want to just make a copy of it, and then you should be able to edit. But in this template, with every launch that you do, or every time you're thinking about what campaign am I creating, you want to have specific goals. So what are you trying to do here? Do you have revenue targets? Do you have an acquisition target? What assumptions are you trying to test or learn? And then from there, you can start to create this plan. So I'm going to give you one example here, and I can talk about more examples if you need more as well. But the idea is this one over here is, let's say if you're selling a health supplement to deal with the flu, or let's say deal with COVID. In the awareness stage, usually your customer is experiencing certain things, right? They have a certain pain points or certain motivators. They might say, oh, you know what? I have a fever, I have a sore throat, I ache all over, I'm feeling frustrated, I'm worried, I'm tired. And then now you start to realize that your customer will have certain questions when they're at this stage. In the awareness stage, typically the kind of questions they have are what I call what is questions, right? What could be causing this fever? What is causing my sore throat? What are symptoms of a flu? What is a flu? So those are the kind of questions that they're asking. Now that you know what questions they're asking, you can think, okay, if my customers are asking those questions, where would they typically seek out the answers? Would they jump to a YouTube video? Maybe not. If not, maybe they would do a Google search. So if you know that they're Google searching, it makes sense to prioritize SEO, right? It makes sense to focus on blogging, content, that kind of stuff. So certain type of content will work better in certain stages because for the same very reason. Customers don't generally want to jump into a workshop to understand, what is causing a fever, flu, or body aches. And then you're thinking, okay, what could be my lead magnet? Maybe instead of getting someone to buy now or jump on a call, that's a bit too much of a rush. Maybe it's a self-diagnosis tool. You must say, fill out this quiz and it'll tell you if you have a flu or is it just a common cold. Certain call to actions will fit in better at certain stages as well. In this stage, like I say, they're probably not ready to buy the solution yet. So maybe it's read more, maybe it's learn more, maybe check this out to learn about how you will treat the flu, check our next article, that kind of stuff. So that's the awareness stage. And then in the consideration stage, it's starting to help your customer understand what solutions are out there. So again, at this stage, they might be asking, okay, now I know that I have a flu, how do I treat it? So usually it's how do I kind of questions, right? How do I boost my immune system? How do I treat my flu without using unnatural medications, that kind of stuff. And then again, the channels might shift. You might find that certain channels will be more effective for communicating or answering those questions. Maybe it's a video, or maybe it's blogs again. So what's the best medication for flu? How do you cure it quickly? What could happen if you don't treat a flu? And then your lead magnet could be a bit different as well. Maybe now it's a downloadable recipe, right? What are home remedies that you can download to or improve your immune system, for example? But I saw someone try to join. There we go. So yep, if you're again downloading, getting your customer to do something, then at each stage you might think, okay, what do I want to collect from them? If you're downloading a guide or recipe, maybe it's appropriate now for you to get their email. And then to move them on to the next stage, now you can say, okay, now they understand that they have the flu. They understand that they're looking for specific type of solutions. This is also how you qualify them as well. So I talked a bit about sales qualified leads, marketing qualified leads. So sales qualified lead, again, this definition is all up to you on how you want to define it. There is no perfect way to define what makes a qualified lead, but you can use what we call lead scoring in order to help improve that. Lead scoring can come in many variations. So for example, it could be things like, let's say for each website visit that someone makes on your website, you give them a +1 score. Let's say if they visited, let's say one of your pricing pages, maybe you give them a +10. Or if they jumped on a demo call, maybe it's a +5. So again, at the end of the day, like lead scoring, don't try to get it perfect to start. Any system is better than no system, because over time, your system will learn and evolve, because it's not something that you set once and just leave it. You should be improving it, tweaking it, making sure it's actually accurate. So, let's say if you're realizing that, oh, I have Mario, he's consuming a lot of content around understanding this, understanding what solutions there are. I think he's ready to move on to that next stage. Maybe I can invite him in for a workshop, or maybe give him an infographic, right? So in the decision stage, you want to start to get someone to see that your solution is the best solution in the market. So generally in that stage, your customer is thinking, who is the right vendor? So for example, they might say, what do I need to know when I'm considering natural supplements? How do I select the right supplement? How do different supplements compare against each other, right? So for example, if let's say it's not a supplement solution that you're selling, I'll give you another example. Let's say if HubSpot was trying to sell their CRM. In the awareness stage, the kind of questions that people might be asking is, what is inbound? What is outbound? What is marketing? What is sales, right? And then the kind of content there would be more around like basic stuff, like what do you need to know about inbound? What's the difference about inbound versus outbound? How does sales work? How does marketing come in? That kind of stuff. And then in the consideration stage, now that I kind of know what inbound is, you might go into more details around like how to build a landing page, how to do email campaigns. So like, how do I kind of questions. And then now that you're talking about how do I, then the decision stage then you're asking is, who is the best vendor? So let's say if you're talking specifically about email marketing, how does, let's say, MailChimp compare with HubSpot, compare with doing mail merges? So you can start to see how you're narrowing your customer down. And the nice thing about this is, again, a customer could enter your funnel at any point, and they don't necessarily have to go through one specific flow. Maybe instead of reading this blog and going to this video, they could read this blog and go to this other video and then go into some other workshop or infographic. So the idea is it's more like a web rather than a straight line that you get your customer to go through. So yeah, here you can see like how to make your own supplements, comparison charts for different supplements and their effectiveness, that kind of stuff. And maybe it's the call to action here is maybe book a free consultation session. Or maybe it's read your customer testimonials. And again, if you are trying to get them to book a session with you, then maybe you need to, in order to proceed, you need to remember to collect phone number, you need to get a schedule for the customer. Maybe you get them to use like a calendar booking link, like a Calendly. But the idea is you're making sure that whatever requirements you have in your form is going to match your call to action. Because it doesn't make sense for you to ask the customer to book a session and all you ask is for an email. So then closing then, now that your customer knows that you are the right solution for them, again, they will have specific questions. Maybe it's how much will it cost? How soon can I see results? Are there any guarantees? So what do you need to create there? Is it an FAQ section? Is it a result guarantee page? Is it some sort of return policy? What's on your landing page or your website, your pre-authorized payment page, that kind of stuff. Yeah, Mario, go ahead.
Do you have any suggestions in terms of figuring out timing, in terms of if you say do the lead scoring and have a sense that they're ready for the next stage? Like, how do you decide, okay, do you wait a few hours, days, weeks, or whatever to kind of get a good fit in terms of, obviously this case might not be, this might be very quick of Flu trying to get a solution, but something like recruitment or something where it takes a bit longer for them to be ready for the next stage.
So I would say it's hard to give you a very specific answer on that, but generally my recommendation is, if you know that someone, again, how it really will come with experience and over time. So the more you know your customer, the more you know your conversion process. Once you've identified them as a quote unquote sales qualified lead, to close them, the best practice is typically less than 3 months. It shouldn't take you more than 3 months to close a customer once you've identified them as a good lead. And the reason why I say 3 months here is obviously, like, if someone is like fresh off the boat and they don't know anything about your product or service and they themselves aren't aware of their own problem, then you need to do a lot more marketing with them, right? And when I say marketing here, it's the goal with the balance between sales and marketing is that sales is more high touch, marketing is more low touch. Because generally sales requires a lot more time, effort, and resources compared to marketing. These are assets that you create that will hopefully nurture your customer over time or be a bit more automated. Automated doesn't mean that it's not personal. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have the human touch. You can still come in and speak to customers once in a while. But your idea is you don't want to overstretch yourself on resources if this customer is not prepared or ready to buy it. But once you know that they're ready to buy, it should be no more than 3 months. If you're seeing a sales cycle that's longer than 3 months, there typically are other factors around that you can try to work around to shorten the period. So I'll give you some quick examples. So for example, like maybe it's the pricing or the package of your offering is too big. So what I mean by that is generally when a customer is evaluating something and thinking about, should I convert, should I switch, should I buy this? They internally go through this process, what I call the decision threshold. So what they're looking at is they're looking at, they might not explicitly say this or even be aware of it, is they are evaluating the cost of changing versus the cost of staying the same. So for example, their cost of staying the same is, in your case, it might be, oh, it's difficult to find talent. It's taking me 6 months to recruit the right person for my company. I'm spending X amount of dollars for my recruiting budget. So what's the cost of staying the same? Maybe it's manual, maybe it's painful, maybe takes a lot of time, whatever it is. And then the cost of changing is, what's the risk involved with this new project? How long is it going to take to see results? How much is it going to cost me? Do I need to train people? Do I need to allocate a team towards this new project? That kind of stuff. So if you can bring down the cost of changing, it makes it easier for someone to take that leap. So that's why you see pilot projects being very effective, where they say, hey, instead of rolling out this with your whole company, maybe we run this small event, we'll do it with a small segment of your company, and then we'll see how it goes. And then if it goes well, then we can do more, for example. So pilot projects, free trials, that kind of stuff are our version of reducing the cost of changing. There might be other smaller things. So for example, in your case, you might say, hey, we'll run a workshop for your company. Maybe that's smaller than actually running that actual campaign that you have for them, right? On the other hand, you can also increase the cost of staying the same for them. And that is usually through perception, by helping them or kind of emphasizing what they're losing out on. So it might be like focusing on, let's say, urgency factors, like let's say new regulation coming into place, highlighting how much time they're wasting, that kind of stuff. So whatever the case, if you want to try to shorten the sales cycle, then you can play around with some of those factors there. Other things might include just generally maybe using the wrong techniques. If you have salespeople on your team or maybe yourself, you might be noticing that, again, at this stage, when you're trying to convert someone that's qualified into a sales lead, if you have a funnel, if you know a process that works, then that's where you can kind of tweak a bit and see, oh, you know what, I have big drop off here, or people are sitting too long in this stage in the funnel. Maybe there's something wrong there, right? So that's where maybe you change the copy, change the approach, change the way that you're saying things. Maybe you want to evaluate your sales calls, your scripts, your emails. Maybe you're noticing that every time I speak to someone, I forget to ask for the next meeting, or maybe I don't set up the next call with the right stakeholders or decision makers. Yeah. So I don't think that really answers the question in terms of timing. It actually gives you a lot more questions to think about. But I would say, as much as you can, probably the first 2 stages here, awareness and consideration, most of that should be marketing centric. Decision and close, that should be more sales centric. Again, it's not like a perfect handover where it's once someone does a specific action, they are now a sales lead. Sometimes it's a bit of both. You might still have to do a bit of marketing and sales with them as well. Make sense? Great. So from there, ideally, if you've mapped this out, you can start to think about, okay, now I know I need X amount of blogs. I want to write a blog on this topic, that topic. I want to have a video. I want to run X number of workshops. You can start to plan out what is your launch plan. Maybe you might say, okay, I want 6 long form blog posts. I want 4 different landing pages with guides and recipes. I need X amount of workshops. I need to create my script for my assessment session. I need a landing page with details for the supplemental subscription. I need a payment page. And then on each of those pages or whatever you're creating, what's your call to action, right? Download for free, book a free assessment session, order a sample, and then you can have follow-ups as well. So, once they've done this, once they've subscribed to your blog, you email them, right? Once they've downloaded something, you send them through a drip campaign. Once they book a session, maybe it's you give them more resources, you invite them for a next session. If they've ordered free sample, maybe you give them a coupon code, whatever it is. And then from there, the rest of the other small tabs that you see in the spreadsheet just help you map out the creation of those assets that we talked about here. So, here's one example of a timeline. You might have certain things that are product centric. So for example, if you're building a new app, if you're not, we can ignore this, but basically, let's say marketing, you want a domain name, you want a company name, branding, website purchase, website publish. You have community, maybe you're starting a new Facebook group, inviting some people to the group, expecting, sending out a new campaign where you ask people to invite their friends. If you're fundraising, same thing, right? Building a cash flow, building a pitch deck, building a list of investors, starting to do your outreach. So you can start to put them down so that you have a clear line of sight in terms of what needs to happen when. This is just another example. Again, this template is yours to use. Feel free to edit as you see fit. Some people like it a bit more visual this way. So this one here is, the main difference here is it still has the categories, it still has the dates. But what's different here is you can see, like, you would say, okay, I'm going to do this campaign, outbound prospecting. I'm expecting to send this many messages. I want to see this much conversion. These are other things that I'm doing that are also sales related. I'm going to these places. You might be doing multiple channel testing. Maybe I'm running an event. Maybe I'm doing some partner shout outs. Who are my partners that I'm targeting? Let's say if you have workshops, or let's say even campaigns, marketing, you have webinars, you have your Facebook ads, your Google ads. What is your expectation in terms of conversion? And then if you don't meet the target, do you want to continue the campaign or do you want to discontinue it? So the idea is this plan should be iterative and you should learn from it. If you find that LinkedIn is not the right channel for you, don't waste your time there. If you find that Instagram is working effectively, maybe you double down on that, right? And then this is more project management, where you can get into like specific due dates, who are the owners, you can assign it to people. Again, if you use Asana or Trello, if you're comfortable with that, then just use whatever you already have. If you don't, then this might help you a bit. And this is more product centric. This one is more event planning. If you're running workshops, you think about potential speakers, venue, channels, call to actions. Content plan, what is the headline? Who are you targeting? When is your publishing date? Are you getting guest writers, guest speakers? What's the format that it's in? What category is it under? And yeah, this is just a weekly meeting template for you and your team. So yeah, any questions on this template so far? Nope. So that is pretty much it. I ran through it quite quickly, but the key goal is, remember that when you're thinking about launching something, be it a new campaign or a new product, it's not a one-off thing. Your goal is to just try to build momentum around your company. So I'll give you some interesting examples. So like, let's say with myself, each workshop I run is a new launch in theory. So in some cases, I've seen some people run different cohorts. So like when I was at Spring, every time we ran a new program, a new cohort would be a new launch. So it doesn't have to be an entirely new program where we're doing something like, instead of fundraising, we do a sales program. Like, yes, you could have something completely different, but in theory, each cohort that you run, you could say, okay, I'm going to run a cohort that's focused on, let's say, food entrepreneurs, or I'm going to run a cohort that's focused on product businesses. And then in that sense, the offering is still the same, but we might target a different target customer. And then we would go back to the plan and say, okay, now that I'm going after a different target customer, what do I need to change? Do I go after them under different channels? Let's say a food entrepreneur or product entrepreneur might not be as familiar with software. Maybe they're not hanging out on LinkedIn. Maybe workshops, we spend more time on workshops. Maybe we leverage certain partners more heavily. Maybe we go after, let's say, small business VC, industry associations, that kind of stuff. So your plan will shift and adjust, but the idea is you can reuse the same template over and over again. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it so far.
Hey, Chin, can I throw a question at you?
Yeah.
There's a certain range of products there that fall into that category creation model. So I know you've got awareness at the top of your stack there, but
Mhm.
then there are the challenge with category creation, which are products that people aren't even aware that they're looking for, which almost, I'm not sure if that falls under awareness in your world. What questions are they asking?
Yep.
Or whether it's a step above that still where they're not even asking the questions because it hasn't come to mind yet.
Yeah, under category creation, I would say that they in that case, there is usually what I would call a unmet desire. So desire is a better word because they're not quite aware of what the problem is yet. So they're not thinking about solutions, but there is something that they realize is lacking. Or sometimes they can't quite express that. So for example, one example might be if you look at, let's say, games or let's say movies. They might notice that, oh, you know what, there seems to be a growing appetite around, let's say, zombie movies and superhero movies, but we haven't seen a merger of both those two different segments. So in that case, like, you want to target what is that unmet desire, and you can try to tease that out by doing different campaigns where you can say like, hey, are people curious about certain topics? Are they looking at things that are related to, I don't know if, since our last conversation, has your product changed much? Is it still around decision making, or
It is a business decision making, though, right? And I think the trick is it's visual scenario builders are a new category. People are used to their Excel spreadsheets, so trying to make people even aware that there's another way to financial model is the category creation challenge.
In that case, I think the type of content that helps you probably the most is going to be more video centric content, where people can see how it works. It's less about educating the customer. It's more about just showing them like, oh, did you know that this was possible, kind of thing.
Yeah, we're looking at almost like, you might have like a new product tear down, a new piece of hardware. We're looking at doing sort of financial model tear downs as one of our things. So let's analyze a company like Peloton and let's tear apart their model in our software to try and create some exposure there. So we're looking at some out of the box ways of doing that. And I think, yes, video and visuals is the answer for those.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that really answers the question, but generally it's more about how could people see usage of your product or service in an interesting way. And then if you think like, in your case, like maybe tear down is the way to go. Like maybe if it's not tear down, like what other cool functions could they envision themselves using your platform for?
Yeah, fair. Thanks, Jim.
I would kind of add, I don't know, just an idea to add to that. I think what you're saying is maybe they're aware of the problem, but aren't aware of different solutions or, options. And I think I have a similar challenge at times. And I think sometimes it's about adapting either the marketing or the messaging to kind of fit in a way where you kind of find this gap where, okay, this is how they normally do it. How do you fit in so it kind of is more seamless rather than doing something completely different? So I don't know if that helps, Sean, but I've noticed sometimes just about wording or messaging can make a difference of convincing them to try something new, even if it's, might be useful for them, but just trying to help them, convince them to take a risk, I guess.
Exactly. Trying to knock down, what do they call them? Objections, right? That they might have at the same time. So trying to answer all those objections is part of the marketing.
I mean, something that you might see that is slightly different between at least both your companies, because I'm aware of both of you. Since you are, John, you're more a bit product centric, more software centric, you will find that you wouldn't need as much effort and time on the relationship build and the sales side of things. Not to say that it's completely irrelevant, but it's more about getting people aware of like, hey, this tool is interesting in this new way. How can I try it out? So like giving people access to the tool, putting it in their hands, showing them what could be possible with it, giving them templates to use and build off, that kind of stuff, making it as easy as possible for them to get started. That's I think the goal. In Mario's case, it's more about the relationship because you're selling to a HR manager or maybe even a founder of a company. In your case, the visual elements are less of a priority, and it's more about, on the other hand of the side, more about the relationship build, getting to know them, getting to really understand them, getting them to like you as well, getting them to experience, I would say, your product or service. So how can you mimic the experience of your product or service in a smaller way? So in your case, it's those workshops, for example.
Yeah, it's great. One of the things we're looking at trying to do is, both the template model and also some sort of pre-built sample scenarios, putting out there in the world some of those questions you have in your awareness stage. So say, for example, as a founder or CFO, what if I can't raise my next round, or what if I need to scale back my team, and these sort of things. Press the button and drop them right into the software, right into one of those samples. So trying to get to that aha moment as quick as possible. Feels like it's leapfrogging some of those other ones. You got to go right from awareness to product.
Yeah, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
And in your case, like the kind of channels that you prioritize, since you know that you focus on more, let's say, video, for example, you might say maybe we're more TikTok or Instagrammable, I guess. Maybe we spend less time on LinkedIn, although LinkedIn is generally more of a business channel. I don't know, because it depends on what algorithm LinkedIn is prioritizing right now. Are they focusing more on community type of content? Are they focusing more on video content? If they don't prioritize sharing a video, then maybe that's not the right channel for you.
Good points.
Great. Any other questions, comments, or you can just chat about your business, or I can run through some other random bonus stuff.
I think at the start you were mentioning like lead magnets. I don't know if you've discussed those, but I've tried that in the past, especially like inbound lead magnets, and so far haven't had success with that. I know, it does help if you have more traffic to your website or are more proactive with marketing, but kind of curious if you have thoughts or suggestions on that.
Yeah, I would say the main thing with lead magnets is a lead magnet is effective if you're actually giving something to someone when they actually need it. So being able, like, if you follow this logic here, if you understand that, someone has this question here, let's say, for example, they're asking about what is a flu, and they just read a blog about, like, what is the difference between a cold and a flu. And then an effective lead magnet there would be a diagnosis tool, because maybe after reading that, if they still aren't too sure, maybe it's a quiz that they fill out. So that could be an effective lead magnet. So I'll give you one example for myself. Like this template here that I show all of you is my lead magnet, because when you access this, I get your email as well. Or some people say like, hey, can you send me a blank copy of it so I can fill it out? Then again, I get your email as well. So the goal is, it helps you, the lead magnet helps you do two things. So one, it helps you capture information from a customer, and it also helps you identify if they're taking the next step to move on. So it doesn't always have to be something that they download. It could be someone signing up for your next workshop. It could be someone who is filling out something on your website. So it can be quite flexible in terms of what you call your lead magnet. It could be booking a consultation session with you. Yeah, it depends.
Jim, what are your thoughts? I know that there's always the rules, and then there's consciously breaking the rules at times, right? So we have, for example, we have a startup cash flow runway template that we kind of want to go and start pitching on lots of other sort of sites and startups and Reddits and all this sort of stuff there. I know that capturing the elusive email address is always one of those sort of first steps there.
Yep.
So in theory, you're putting some step between them where they have to fill out an email address before you sort of send them to that template. Counter to that is creating no barriers and allowing them to get directly to that template in your software to, in theory, have that aha moment. And then something in that world, when they try and move forward, they then have to sign up to do more. Thoughts on A versus B and barriers to that aha moment there?
Personally, I'm more in favor of B, and I'll say that with a caveat. So the goal here is, if you notice with here, even in this example here, I'm not collecting their email in the first touch. You want to collect whatever is relevant depending on where you think your customer is ready to hand over that right information as well. So if you want to get someone to experience your product or service without before they're ready to give you the email, then by all means go with me. Like get them to give it to them. And then from there, the next step is maybe like, oh, now you want to be able to replicate the template, for example, then you have
Exactly.
to like create an account, for example.
Yeah, like we have like a guest mode, and you're able to do a bunch of things. But the moment you try and do anything that's basically requires you to have a something in our database, there we prompt you to sign up before you can kind of expand upon that. So, kind of using that approach. So, cool.
Yeah, and specific to you, might not apply as much to Mario. Is in the software world nowadays, usage-based pricing is getting more and more popular. And the idea around usage-based pricing is instead of gating content or gating features of your product or service, instead of having like a free version and a premium where they unlock certain features or certain packages, what you want to do with usage-based pricing is you give them free for a certain level. Maybe it's free for like X templates or X number of nodes, for example. And then if they need to go over a certain number of nodes or they need to have a bit more flexibility around that, then they start to upgrade. You're still giving them all the same features in the free version, but when they want more, then they upgrade.
Yeah, we've got a version like that. Build 3 templates for free, and then if you try and create that 4th one or just complexity of a scenario, we've been experimenting with not enough people running through yet to kind of really know, but testing that model too. Basically reducing barriers to that aha moment, right?
Cool. Any other questions? So I can fly through a few other basic stuff that might kind of spark some inspirational ideas as well.
I'll take the bonus material. Go for it, Jen.
So if you're in a situation where you have to think about articulating your go-to-market strategy or your launch strategy to investors or boards, the flow that you follow through is you want to think and talk about your revenue and growth objectives. That's what they care about the most, right? So pertaining to your launch plan, how is that going to affect revenue and growth? How is it going to affect your trajectory? And then from there, you lead into talking about your strategy. You talk about the initiatives. So that's also what they care about a lot. How are you going to be spending your money, right? Hires, markets that you'll spend time in, product development roadmap, resources, what's your budget, what's your burn rate, funding requirements, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the flow that you use this template in if you're going to kind of board members or investors and talking about how you want to plan out your go-to-market. More around the presentation piece, same thing, be transparent with them. If you don't know certain things, be honest. It's okay to not have all the answers. And it's okay to say like, hey, we're testing certain things, or great question, let me come back to you after I actually speak to an expert. That's all absolutely okay as well. So don't be defensive. Don't assume that they're trying to target you and say that your launch plan is not a good plan. At the end of the day, you just want to understand like, why are they doubting you? Why are they asking some questions? Do they have concerns around your initial target customer or your early adopter? Do they have concerns around the channels that you're using? Do they have experience on what works better, what doesn't, right? When you go to talk about financials, when you've already started to implement the plan and when you're starting to see results, the best way to visualize it with them is, something like this. You might say, okay, this was our target. This was actually how much we actually got. This is the difference. So they can quickly see like what's in green, what's in red, and what's working well, what's not working well. How could they lean in? How can they add support? That kind of stuff. Future casting. So you can also start to think about like, what else could come down the pipeline. You might say like, oh, you know what? People are back to working in person instead of working from home. Are there certain kind of headwinds or opportunities that you can lean into? Or are there specific challenges that are coming in? For example, if you're in the mortgage space, you might say, oh, interest rates are going up. Buyers are less inclined to borrow now. How might that change your offering, right? Are there regulations? Are there changes in the demographics? Maybe is it Gen Zs coming up now and becoming people who are in management? Is it millennials? Is there new technology coming up? Are competitors doing certain things? So you can start to talk about that in the conversation with investors as well. So it helps for you to plan this, not only if you're going to a board or going to an investor, but in general, because you might say like, oh, you know what? There are certain things that I could capture with my business that I didn't think about as well. So yeah, those are just some other quick things that I wanted to fly through. Cool. Again, I can share the slides, so I know I speak very quickly in my presentations. Let me grab the link. Right. That's pretty much everything I have for you today. I have a bunch of other workshops coming up. I think all of you have already seen it, but if you haven't already, I'll be talking about pricing tomorrow, and we'll be talking about copywriting and emails on Thursday. We have sales techniques as well next week, and revenue and growth optimization the week on the Wednesday for that week. Cool. Otherwise, you can have the rest of your evening. I hope this was helpful in some way.
Thanks, Chen.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks as well.
Yeah, no problem. I can hang
See
around
you.
a bit if you have something you want to
Oh.
chat through.
No, I think a lot of this we've discussed in the past, so I kind of remember a lot of the details.
Great.
But I'll for sure join you in the, well, I think I'm signed up for all of them except maybe some next week. So
Cool. That's good. All right. I'll see you around. Take care.
yeah, see you tomorrow.